Hello, Bedford. Welcome to Candidates Corner. I'm Sue Mullen, today's host, and with me is Jerry Hanauer, who is a candidate for state representative in District 7. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
It's a privilege to be here with you.
Jerry, you have sat in both of these seats during this election cycle, so I know that you sort of know the drill, if you will, as to what kinds of information we think our viewers might be interested in. So my first question to you would be, tell us a little bit about yourself personally.
Well, I've lived in New Hampshire for about 34 years now. I've moved from Bedford, Mass. to Bedford, New Hampshire. But I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, which was in some ways similar to Bedford, New Hampshire, in that we had an excellent educational system. People really prided themselves and moved to Bedford on account of the, and moved to Newton on account of the educational system.
Right,
it was a draw, and I know Bedford, New Hampshire is that way too. So there were some similarities there. It was only 5 or 7 miles from Boston, so it's a little bit more urban. But then I had a career with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Okay, let's go back just a little bit to those days in Newton.
That's more than a little bit.
Brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I had 3 brothers.
Okay.
You know, each successive one, I was the second, and each successive one after me, I think, was supposed to be a girl. It didn't work out after the 4th. My parents gave up. And,
well, that's good, because I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, right? So you were educated in the public school system in Newton?
I was indeed. And then, after graduating from Newton South High School, I went to another public college, but it was in the Midwest, University of Wisconsin, and I majored in zoology, so I have a background in the sciences, which I still think in my writing, for example. This was from writing all these research reports on lab results.
So you're very factually
no imagination,
oriented.
but at least hopefully to the point.
Right.
And after graduating, then I took a career. First of all, I got married in 1971, and my wife, Benny, is the only wife I've ever had, only love I've ever had. Well, I think, yeah, only love I've ever had, the least of people. And so we moved up to, my career's been with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I started in Washington, D.C. there.
Got it.
And mostly the Federal Housing Administration. So I've had kind of a career in civil service. And I believe in government, and that government can be an effective tool. It can sometimes be like any human organization, a little disorganized or bureaucratic, but it can be an effective tool in improving people's lives.
And is that what you were doing? So after college, when you went to work for HUD, was that in Bedford, Mass. or Bedford, New Hampshire?
That was in Washington, D.C.
Oh, that was in Washington.
Yeah,
okay.
I trained to be a real estate appraiser and moved up to Boston, Mass. and spent quite a bit of time in the Boston, Massachusetts HUD office, appraising houses for Federal Housing Administration loans.
Okay.
People don't know this, but FHA in insuring loans was the first, and this happened in 1934 when it was founded. Before FHA, there was no such thing as a level annuity mortgage payment.
Okay.
You paid interest only for 5 or 10 years, whatever the bank dictated.
Right.
And if when your loan was up, you didn't have the money and the bank didn't want to extend your loan, like they didn't in the Depression when they were short on cash, you lost your house. They owned your house.
They owned your home.
So it was the federal government that instituted the low-level annuity mortgage payment, whereby you pay the same amount every month, and then at the end of the term, you own your house.
Right.
So I appraised houses for that. I sold houses for the Federal Housing Administration. When I moved up to New Hampshire, I became chief underwriter for the Federal Housing Administration for Northern New England.
How did you decide on Bedford, New Hampshire?
How did I decide? Well, it was 34 years ago.
Did you have children at the time?
I did. I had 2 young children at the time. They were, I think, 5 and 7 at the time, or 6 and 8.
I know that in contemporary times, people talk about the schools as being a draw for their families coming to Bedford.
Well, not so much back then. And it's not that K through 8 wasn't excellent in Bedford, but we had no high school, and we were sending our kids to West High School, and both my kids went to West High School. But when I first came to Bedford, the school committee in Bedford, among all the members, there wasn't one who had a child in the Bedford schools.
Interesting.
And not one who was interested in children in Bedford schools either, really.
Okay, well,
so we've
very
really made a turn.
interesting. Right, right.
So I lobbied hard, did the best I can to try to get a high school in Bedford, and it happened, and I was delighted when it happened, but it was too late for my kids.
Right. Are those
my
kids?
grandkids are going there.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, are your kids still local?
They are. My older daughter, Emily, I won't say how old, she has a career in banking. And a lot of people in town know Emily. She was Emily Whitehead. She was the branch manager of the Citizens Bank in Bedford.
Right.
And she's now, she got a promotion. She's like a business loan manager for the region now.
Great.
That's one daughter. And she has two children of her own.
Yep.
And one's a senior in Bedford High School, and one is a freshman in Bedford High School, a girl and a boy. And her husband, she had a tragedy in her life, Emily. Her first husband died about 12 or 13 years ago. She remarried, though, a wonderful guy who was a principal of an elementary school, really good.
Right.
He had two kids of his own, almost the same age, so they're like 15, 16, 17, and 18. They live on Beals Road. They're good friends. They're brothers and sisters.
So do they have 4 high schoolers in
They have
in their
4 kids in the Bedford High School right now. Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly
So,
offer them all the respect in the world for living through the next few years.
yeah, well, I'm glad that what didn't work out for them, my own kids, that for
Right.
their kids, they can go to Bedford High School. The other daughter is a teacher. She teaches elementary school kids, and she lives in Merrimack, and she has a 5 and an 8-year-old boy. So
so
all
you've
my
got
kids
quite
are
the
within
span
like a
of
little bike
ages.
ride around, and I see all my grandkids. It's a wonderful arrangement. And grandparenting is an important and great part of my life.
I can
too.
attest to that.
Yeah.
So besides your family and your sort of career aspirations as a politician, what else do you do to keep you busy?
Career aspirations as a politician.
Well, now, maybe a late life career
Yeah,
aspiration.
some sort of that.
What else do you do to keep yourself busy?
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up even in Newton. I was active in the Boy Scouts, and we used to come up at least once a year to hike in the White Mountains. And I just developed a love for the state in general, but certainly for the White Mountains.
Right, right.
And so I still do a lot of hiking. And in fact, after I retired from HUD, I took up hiking more seriously. And I've hiked through there are 48 peaks in New Hampshire that are above 4,000 feet, and so a friend of mine and I, hiking buddies, we hiked through all of those now. And,
You have?
Yeah.
That is very impressive.
well, yesterday, the day before, I was interviewing Wayne Goldner, and he was like doing them in the wintertime. And
Oh,
I picked
okay.
like
Well, that's
60-degree
crazy.
days.
That's
and it was like
just crazy, though.
Perfectly sunny. Is that a cloud over there? Then we're not going. It was pretty easy.
Search and Rescue, I think, likes that kind of approach to
Yeah.
hiking in the White Mountains.
Well, I know my limitations. Like some of the people who are search and rescue have to deal with don't, I guess.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I know that you have a photographic business at the moment.
When I was much younger, when the kids were the age of my grandkids or even younger, I had a photographic hobby. I had a darkroom in my basement, and I developed photographs. And then when life got busy,
Yep.
because the kids demanded more attention, which was wonderful, that's fine, I put it all away in boxes and knew I'd come back to it sometime in my life. So after I retired from federal government work, I opened up all the boxes. Everything's obsolete. Everything's going digital.
Right,
So
right.
I took a course at, I think, Manchester Community College in Photoshop, actually. And I fell in love with Photoshop. I just loved it and started converting all my old slides and film to digital format and got into digital photography.
I should be doing that myself, Jerry.
Having requests for people to take their old slides and
I'm sure.
in my business. So I have a business as photo art imaging because I fell in love with Photoshop and the manipulative possibilities.
Right.
And I don't use those for nefarious purposes.
No,
but
the creative license, so to speak.
yeah,
Right.
but I take old photographs, 100-year-old photographs that are family photographs that have yellowed, or darks have gotten lighter, the lights have gotten darker, and they've yellowed. So I restore them to new condition, print out a new picture, and so it's photo restoration.
Well, I'm
business
sure
mostly.
after our viewers hear that this is something that you do as a sideline, you're probably going to get calls from people asking for your help.
I have all sorts of sidelines that are getting more and more busy. That's okay.
Talk to me about your sidelines into sort of civic leadership. I know that you're involved in a lot of local things, the library, the Rotary Club. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I've always, I think, had an instinct for kind of, I want to say, community service. When I was in Bedford, Massachusetts, I was an elected assessor in Bedford, Mass, which
Right.
I think even then had a bigger tax base than we have in Bedford, New Hampshire now. And so I enjoyed that work. And after I moved up here and retired, I got involved with Friends of Bedford Cemetery.
Right.
I've gotten involved with, especially with the Library Foundation, quite a bit. So I'm chair of the Bedford Public Library Foundation now. And
Okay.
we raise money, and we have a drive every year, and people donate. They love their library, and we're able to afford things for the library. Audiovisual systems, children's summer reading
Through
program.
the generosity of citizens
Through
of
people
Bedford?
who donate to the library for the betterment of the library, and these are things that the town's budget for the library wouldn't otherwise cover.
Right.
So, we like to think we're making some sort of a difference in what really is a treasure in our town.
Hey,
the
that
Bedford
library is a
Public
hopping place. I can't imagine that you don't feel like you're making a difference because it's busy all the time.
The latest thing we did, and it's becoming a trend in public libraries, is to have a young adult space. And I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's really kind of a charming little space
Yep,
that they
I
cut
have.
out by the bow front window that fronts on Meeting House Road, and so they have the best view in the library. And
Oh, it's
we have
great for
kid
them.
furniture. And
It's great for them to have someplace to go when they're not in school.
It's wonderful.
Yep.
And they're always, from so far, the experiences, they're always respectful for the other people in the library. And they keep it down.
Yep.
And a lot of people are in there studying. Kids are in there studying. It's just a great space. And the furniture is really neat. If you haven't seen it, when you go into the Bedford Public Library, after you pass the front desk, turn to the
Take a
right
right.
and go into the young adult session. Take a look at it. It's really nice.
How about the Rotary Club? Are you still involved with
Oh
Rotary?
yeah, I'm very involved with the Rotary Club. I've been as president, I've been as secretary, I've been as treasurer. Now I'm just an active member, and that's okay.
Can you give me a brief description of what exactly the Rotary Club does?
Well, it's a service club, and we raise money, and we give the money away. And the way we raise money is through community events. We have a couple of those a year that are fundraisers. If you don't know about the Idol contest that takes place in the Dana Center
right,
at
yeah.
St. A's College, we have great musical singing talent from all over the state
Right.
who competes kind of American Idol style. And there are a panel of 3 judges, and they pick out the 4 finalists of the 12 who will be on stage, and then the 4 finalists sing their final number, and this will be, I think, the second or third Saturday in
I know that
January.
it's
I'll
grown in-
publicize it in the newspaper.
I know that it's grown in popularity
Oh,
because
it's
hear
a wonderful time.
people of all ages talking about it.
Yeah.
So
Well, then they get involved, because then the 4 finalists, people vote for their
Right,
favorite,
right.
and that's what
right,
determines who the winner is.
everybody has a favorite,
Yeah,
right?
and it's better talent year after year. It's just better and better talent. Oh, we also have, it used to be the Bedford road races that ran through town here. Now it's become, and very successfully, it's become a fundraiser called Trails to Ales. And it's a trail
Right.
race through the trails of Legacy Park. And people love it. And it's not just, 18 and older or 21 and older
Right, it's
people who drink beer. Not at all.
a family event.
It's a real family event and a fun event. And it was the first inaugural race was perfect summer evening in August, and turnout was really good. We limited it to 500, I think, contestants, because we didn't know how crowded it would be.
Right.
We can go bigger, and there's demand for us to go bigger. So we raise money through those events.
Hats off to the Rotary Club and to you for your involvement.
We give the money away. We give it to the Soup Kitchen in Manchester, the New Horizons. We give it to the New Hampshire Food Bank. We give it to the Bedford Food Pantry. We give it to scholarships for high school students, particularly, a lot of that money.
Well, and
we
you
also have-
set a great example for the young people in town too. So I certainly appreciate that. So,
Yeah.
you're running for state legislature.
Oh, that's right. I am.
The task at hand. We're 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
Tell me why you decided to throw your hat into the ring this time around.
It was more like not taking it out. I've done this before.
That
People
I
maybe
know,
that.
right.
Hopefully they'll recognize the name of the ballot as something they've seen before, and hopefully now they can associate a face with it. I think I've always had an instinct for public service.
Right.
Though my life is certainly full now, I would change it in order to participate, fully
Right,
in the activities of the legislature. Wouldn't be any doubt about it. If it doesn't happen, I have a full life. But if it does happen, it'll be a term which will be enjoyable, and I hope will be of service to the people of Bedford. And I care a lot about laws, and I care a lot about our town, and I think our town's interests could definitely be served better in the legislature than they are currently. I think.
What issues are you most particularly concerned about?
Well, let me talk about a couple. For sure, education. I think the public schools are of paramount importance. I was publicly schooled all through my life, and I benefited for it. I think the economy benefited from it. So the ability to keep producing people who will be productive members of society and the economy is mostly dependent on public education. Sure, I'm not saying that private education doesn't have a place,
creating that workforce has certainly been identified as a critical need in New Hampshire right now.
Absolutely. And so I do not advocate any higher taxes or any new taxes. I do advocate taking what taxes we get, maybe doing a better job in administering those taxes.
Okay.
We can talk about that or maybe not, but we're doing a better job of administering the taxes we have, no new taxes, but taking more of the money and putting it to education. I consider myself a conservative Democrat. Maybe people think that's some sort of an oxymoron. It's not.
Oh, I don't think that at all.
Not at all. But
how do you feel about the educational scholarship proposals that have been brought forth during the last couple of legislative sessions?
Yeah, it goes back a ways, and this is something I really wanted to drive this point home more than maybe any other point in this discussion. Is that people who represent us in Concord now are doing so because they have beliefs which are at best oblivious to the needs of Bedford, and at worst contrary to the best interests of our town. And certainly one of those was Senate Bill 193. And Senate Bill 193 took money which we pay out of our real estate taxes, statewide property taxes, and that statewide property tax was set up in order to equalize educational opportunities across the state.
Right.
And so they would take that money and use it and allow private schools, parochial schools, homeschooling organizations to establish a scholarship fund. And with that scholarship fund, they would lure people out of public schools into private schools and give them a scholarship to go to a private or a parochial or a homeschooling situation.
And where is that money coming from?
It comes from your local property taxes. There's no question about it. The statewide portion of the property taxes for the typical Bedford resident is about $1,000 a year. So this is taking money, public money, and giving it for private interests, for private educational interests. I have nothing against education on the private side. If people want to do that, that's fine.
Right.
But I think the most important thing, especially for us here in Bedford with such a fine educational program now, is to support our public schools with public money, not people leaving the public school system with public money.
All right. Well, it's clear that you have strong feelings about that.
Did it come through good?
It did. It did. It did. Talk to me a little bit. I know that House Bill 225 has been something that has been of interest to you, which directly impacted our library. And that's something that you've actually spoken to me about off camera and are quite pleased and proud that Bedford was a recipient of some dollars that helped us establish the library as an effective geothermal usage facility. Talk a little bit about that, Jerry.
Okay, well, in this, we have a law which requires electric utilities to develop an electric generation renewable portfolio. That is to say that they're required by law to generate a certain amount of their electricity that they sell to us as consumers or to businesses that come from renewable sources.
Okay.
So that's not carbon fuels, it's not natural gas, it's solar, it's
Wind.
electric, it's wind.
Yep.
It's not, it's
Yep.
wind, it's geothermal.
Yep.
It could be hydro.
Water.
Hydro.
Right.
Could be hydro, although I don't agree with devastating the environment in order to bring hydropower down from hundreds and hundreds of miles away across pristine wilderness. I'm not for that.
Right.
Anyway, that's a different story. But the electrical, the renewable energy standards, when they're not met by an electrical utility, they pay into a fund called the Renewable Energy Fund.
Right.
And that Renewable Energy Fund funds projects for renewable energy. So if I'm an electrical generator and I didn't meet my mark for the electricity that I'm selling, then as far as renewable sources, then I pay a penalty into that fund. And that fund, $388,000 from that fund went to the Bedford Public Library project for their geothermal project, for their geothermal energy system here in town. Because of that system, the Bedford Public Library has to pay no heating bills in the wintertime, no cooling costs in the summertime. It's a remarkable system, and we benefited from it. And yet, two of our legislators, our state senator
Yep.
and one of our state representatives, sponsored a bill which would do away with the renewable energy standards in New Hampshire. I wrote to both of them. I
Yep.
mean, I'm not just here to complain to the public about what's
No.
going on.
I know that you're a voice for yourself and others as well.
I wrote to both of them, and it died a death in committee. So, but two people sponsored a bill which so directly helped
Right.
our town.
Right. Right.
Plus the environmental consequences of renewable energy. I think people more and more day by day are realizing what a problem we have.
Oh, and I think it's fabulous that we have someone like you who actually understands not only the environmental implications, but the financial implications of what happens when you don't take advantage of the opportunities that are out in front of us.
Sure. And I actually think that the economic opportunities that are generated by renewable energy are far outdistance the advantage to New Hampshire of continually supporting fossil fuels,
Right.
which doesn't make sense to me at all because New Hampshire gets nothing really out of
Right.
fossil fuels.
Right. I know that healthcare has also been an issue near and dear to you.
Yeah. Again, there are economic aspects and health aspects to Medicaid expansion, and that any state representative or senator would vote against Medicaid expansion, especially when the lion's share, and I mean like 97% of that money comes from the federal government.
Right.
And the healthcare industry is one of our most, perhaps the most important industry in New Hampshire and one of the most important in the country. And Medicaid expansion just feeds that industry.
Right.
And plus, it so improves the health of people who otherwise wouldn't have access to health care.
Right. I believe the number is the expansion, 50,000 people or akin to are covered under Medicaid expansion. And without Medicaid expansion might not have any health care insurance at all.
Yeah. And aside from not having any health care insurance at all, and if it weren't for this Medicaid expansion opportunity that these people have, these people would become sicker and sicker.
Right.
Their families would become devastated, often bankrupted, and it would be a burden. They'd be a burden to government financially because
It's much more expensive to take care of somebody who is either chronically sick or critically sick than it is to provide preventative care. Is that what you're saying?
preventative care, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, people who aren't insured, they don't go to the hospital until there's a dire emergency.
Right.
Until their cancer reaches stage 3 or 4 instead of in the early stages when it can be cured. It's a burden which is relieved in Medicaid expansion. To me, there's just no argument about the advantage to the economy and to the health of our state.
Right.
Sure.
Bedford has certainly grown over the past decades since you've been here, Jerry. Do you feel that you're representing a segment of Bedford that has gone underrepresented?
I think what's underrepresented is people's best interests. And what's unfortunate is that people just don't pay enough attention. People have busy, busy lives. They have busy lives, and they can't really keep track of the goings-on in Concord. And that allows state representatives who may be cordial to them when they have a beer at the bar or whatever,
Right.
Are not helping Bedford schools and are helping the Bedford Library. They're not doing, they're out on some ideological mission, whether it be an anti-education mission,
Right.
whether it be a pro fossil fuels industry mission, that have nothing to do with New Hampshire interests and nothing to do with Bedford interests. So I'd say it's not so much that they're underrepresented, that I'm hoping to focus their attention on, what good candidates would bring to them as opposed to some of our current representatives right now.
All right. Listen, this time has flown.
Sure has.
I am going to ask you to look into this camera, if you will, and to give us your final comments and assurances that voting for Jerry Hanauer is a good thing for the town of Bedford.
I'm going to do that. And first of all, I'd like to say that there are new voices in town running for state representative, and I'm very proud to be among them. For people who are looking for who to vote for state representative, whose lives are busy, can't afford to keep up with the goings-on in Concord, vote for people who really have dedicated lives of service to their community. So, we have Doctors Wayne Goldner and Richard Friedman, who had exemplary careers, humanitarian instincts in medicine, and do so in their retirement. We have Sue Mullen, who elected to the Bedford Educational System Hall of Fame, the first teacher to be so inducted. We have Lisa Nash, who has twice got a Champion for Children award from the Bedford schools and is an active leader in her church. And we have Cami Leshner, who's an expert in conflict resolution and Vice President of the Taxpayers for Quality Education here in Bedford. With Catherine Rambo, who is an elected town councilor, a public servant. So I'm just so, and I hope I fit among these great people. So vote for those people and vote for me, Jerry Hanauer, if you think that I'm worthy of your vote. I hope you do. November 6th.